shame exists in silence. It exists in the dark. So by speaking out, by standing on a stage, by sharing my story publicly, every time I do that, it just kind of shifts another layer and it erodes another layer until eventually the shame is just diluted.
It's a statistic that may shock you. But according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women globally have been subjected to physical or sexual violence. That is 736 million women. Do you know somebody? I do. More than I want to admit, actually. And Madeleine Black is one of them. But her story goes back over 40 years. And who knows what the statistics were then? Because you didn't talk about such things back then, did you? She was 13 in the 1970s when she was raped and tortured for hours. The boys? They were never caught. The trauma, however, trapped inside her for years. That is until she opened up and shared her story decades later. A story that moved this once psychotherapist into a new chair, that of storyteller. Because as Madeline says, you grow through what you go through. During our conversation, Madeline opened up about what made her take the stage and go from being a victim to courage cultivator. She gets personal about how she not only found her own voice, but how she misunderstood the silence of others close to her, including the secrets both of her parents kept from their own past. Plus, a forgiveness project that gave her permission to release her anger and become unbroken. I've listened to your TED Talks, watched them. I've been following you for quite some time, and the brevity and courage of, and you're called a courage cultivator, so it's perfect, that you are sharing your story from something that happened so long ago, but still is so a part of you and your story, and just your background and what you do as being a psychotherapist. How you were able to heal from something like that and move forward is even more mind-boggling to me. So thank you for being here, and I hold space for you to share your story.
Sure. So my story really goes back to the late 1970s when I was just a 13-year-old girl. And I guess I just did something that most people, I'm sure, have done at some point in their life. They lied to their parents. I had a friend whose mum was away, and she said, let's go on a night out. And things at home were a bit tricky because my mum was unwell, so she was bedridden for a while. And I just said, yeah. So we lied about where we were staying. We were meant to be staying with her grandma. And we told her grandma that she was coming to my house, and I told my mum I was going to her grandma's, but actually we went back to her mum's empty flat. We decided to buy alcohol. I'd never drunk before, so obviously it didn't take long for me to get sick, and I was just, thrown up all over the cafe that we were in, where we kind of drank it in secret. And there was a crowd of boys on our table, but 2 of them, went to the local American school. They put us into a taxi and they took us back to her mum's empty flat. And then when we got into the flat, they put us into separate bedrooms, and they weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol. They had other things in mind. And to cut a long story short, I suppose, the 2 of them proceeded to rape and torture me over about a 4 to 5 hour period.
Oh, Madeline, to be able to speak so eloquently about this, and I'm sure there's been plenty of time to work through this. This being in the mental health side of things for so long, that sweeping these things under the rug does not help us in the healing process. I know in my own traumas that it was when I started talking about them and doing the healing that the healing started to happen. But the other side of the story is that this is still part of your life, right? It's just not, you're creating a new narrative for yourself. So Where was this shift for you where you said, I want to live with this differently?
I guess when I decided to go public, which was 2014, I was asked by the founder of the Forgiveness Project, an amazing woman and organization, a woman who's the founder, Marina Cantacuzino. She knew about my story from just online chats, and she said, could she share it on her website because she collects stories of forgiveness. And she said, you don't need to put your photo or your name, you could be anonymous. And at that point, I had really done a lot of healing work, and I just thought, I'm tired. I'm tired of being ashamed for a crime that was committed against my body that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't personal. It could have been anyone. It wasn't to do with what I was wearing, what I was drinking. It came down to the fact that these two men decided to rape and torture me. And I just thought, I'm never going to get rid of the shame if I don't challenge the shame, because it kind of lied to me for a long time. And I believed my shame. I thought if people knew, they would be disgusted or they wouldn't want to know me anymore. They would look at me differently. So I said, no, I will share my story and I will use my photo and I will use my name. I can't say I wasn't scared and I wasn't worried, but it just felt the right thing to do for me and for other people. Because why should we be ashamed? It was a crime committed against me and many, many people as well. And actually, I could never have imagined where that start of that journey, then going public, would take me. It's been a phenomenal journey, really, really has.
When you talk about shame, and this is something that's quite common with women, and where we feel that we've made a mistake or we're in the wrong, or how did I put myself in this position, or just questioning our own sexuality and femininity and living with that into adulthood. How was the process of moving from shame to empowerment for you?
Yeah, my second TEDx is called "Why I'm Shaming Shame" because yeah, shame, inappropriate shame, has no place. It just really holds us back. And I start off by holding a beach ball and ask people to imagine that they've plunged it into a tank of water and they're holding it underwater. And that's really what it felt like, that pressure of anybody finding out about my dark and shameful secret was just terrifying. So really, shame exists in silence. It exists in the dark. So by speaking out, by standing on a stage, by sharing my story publicly, every time I do that, it just kind of shifts another layer and it erodes another layer until eventually the shame is just diluted, and I don't have any shame left at all anymore. It really has, I'd say, evaporated. It's gone now.
I'm happy to hear that. And the shame is gone, you said.
Absolutely. Every time I stand there on the stage or share my story on the radio or the TV, I don't think about me anymore and my story. I just think about how it can help someone else. It's not about me speaking anymore. It's about who's listening to my story. And
Mm.
that just really kind of almost gives me a purpose. It makes me think, I mean, I don't believe that things happen for a reason. I don't take on that train of thought, which I know a lot of people say, but I think I can make reason, I can make purpose out of what happened. So I can turn my pain into purpose, which I think that's what I've done. And it just feels like almost this is my duty. If I can stand on a stage and share my story and it will help somebody else, or more than hopefully one person, then that's really what I need to do.
Yeah, because what is the alternative? Holding it in, not healing, just putting it in the past, which that's what I mean, that is what many do. I
Yeah.
think we've all been guilty of that at some point, and maybe guilt's a strong word because that also sounds like we're wronging ourselves. But when we do that, we're not helping anyone else. And I remember one time, Madeline, when I was talking about some of my own traumatic happenings that happened in my life and not sharing my story and talking to somebody who resonated with my story, they said to me, it's such a disservice not to share your gift so that you can touch, move, and inspire somebody else. And when that clicked in my head, like, yeah, I could either do this and try to do this all on my own, or share it in a much more public way to where perhaps there's somebody in that audience or listening that is sitting there going, I have this and I don't know how to deal with it. Is that kind of where you're?
Well, that's where I'm at, but I would never pressurize anyone to do what I do, to stand on a stage and speak to thousands of people. You know, it's not for everybody, but I would encourage people that haven't found their voice, just to find someone. It doesn't have to be on a stage or the radio or the TV, you know, just find someone to share your story with, whether that's a therapist or a friend, but make sure it's someone that you trust. Because I think to be believed and to be listened to, but to really be heard, there's nothing more valuable than that. And if you find the wrong person and they start questioning, or, you know, they put a seed of doubt, and it can just do so much damage. So just find someone that you trust and share your story with them, because you're right, it does hold you back. And I think when we hold it in, it becomes toxic, it poisons us. And I guess if you can't find someone, tell yourself your story, you know, stop denying it, stop minimizing it, write it down, read it back to yourself, you know, because we're so good at saying, oh, it wasn't really that bad. I don't think it was really called rape. I don't think it, you know, maybe I just led him on or whatever. No, we know in our gut and we know in our heart what is what. So stop minimizing, stop denying it, really, because it's natural to want to deny it. We don't want to look at these dark chapters in our life, but yeah, find someone or just tell yourself your story.
I love that you touch on that, because that's exactly what I mean. I mean, if the stage, the big stage, like we're used to, is not for you, and that's a whole nother fear, because there's always a fear of public speaking that's like prominent, then be your own audience to the story. Like, I love what you share about, you know, write it down or just confiding in one person, because the more you see it on the page, it's words, it's a happening that is past. How do you heal to go forward? And sometimes when we just are in our thoughts, we can do so much damage when we're not in the process of letting someone know this happened, having somebody witness us. And like you said, you know, validate and, you know, appreciate us and just let our story be known as being important and real. So it's more than just shame. It's the self-blame, right? Yeah. So curious about going back to that time. Were these boys ever caught?
No, because I didn't speak about it. Because one of the last things, one of them that I kind of called him the worst one, what he said to me is that if I tell anyone, that he would find me and he would kill me. And he was holding his knife against my throat at this point, and he had used his knife on me. So, yeah, I believed him. I looked into his eyes and I thought, this man is actually capable of killing someone. I could see that in his eyes. So yeah, I didn't tell anyone. It took me about 3 years, but in the meantime, my behavior deteriorated, because, you know, what we don't speak about has got to come out somehow. So it came out in all of my behaviors. But after about 3 years, I couldn't literally find the words, but I wrote a very short kind of outline, brief details of what had happened, and I left it on my pillow for my parents to read. And that's how I kind of found my voice.
So with that, how was the support with your family?
Well, yeah, it was not how I planned it. My friend who was involved, they called her, and she said actually that I had got it wrong, that they, you know, these were nice boys. They were sons of diplomats. They just brought us home. You know, they didn't do what I said they had done. So that was really tough. My dad wanted to go to the police. He was still insistent, and my mum was really, really quiet. And I misunderstood her silence for many, many years. But in that moment, I just thought, you know, my friend has betrayed me and my mum doesn't believe me. So it was a very dark time for me. It was really tough.
Your friend who was with you, was she also assaulted as well?
You know what? I don't know. I've never known. And actually, interestingly, even with social media, none of us have ever found her. It used to drive me crazy. I used to want answers to these questions that I know I'll never get. Why didn't she back me up? Why did she say what she did? So I have my own theories, but they're only theories. So either the same thing happened to her, and like me, she blanked it out for years. or nothing happened to her and she couldn't understand what I was saying, or she was just worried that we'd get into trouble because, we were just naughty teenagers and had alcohol in an empty flat and met boys, all the things that you're told not to do. So, I'll never know. But I can't drive myself crazy with trying to find answers that I'll never find. So I just have to let it go somehow.
Sometimes no answers are the answers, right?
Yeah.
They really are. I am curious about the relationship that you have developed with your mother, who, I mean, you had your father who wanted to go to the police, but your mother not wanting to do it for whatever her reasons and having that conversation. Can you touch on that a little bit? How that has
Sure.
changed?
So, my father had passed away about 23 years ago. So it was after my dad had died, and I was going back to therapy again because my eldest daughter, Anna, became 13. So the same age that I was. And I was then studying psychotherapy and doing loads of personal development courses and different events. And yeah, all my memories returned. And I was speaking to my mum about it, and she told me, even though she was married for nearly 40 years and had 5 kids of my dad, that um, something that he didn't know. So, as an 8-year-old girl, she was raped multiple times by her neighbor. Every time my grandma would send her to play with her friend, the friend's dad would assault my mum. So she was able to tell her brother, who told my grandparents, and he was charged because he was also found to have been abusing his daughters. But while he was in prison, my mum's family they packed up the house and they moved away, but they never ever spoke about it again. So, I understand now when I was confronting her with my truth, she had so much unprocessed trauma that she couldn't say anything because my dad didn't even know, she never got support or help. So once I knew that her story, it just undid all those years of me being angry at her for thinking she didn't believe me when actually she just couldn't find her voice. So it was very sad. I felt sad for my mum, as that little 8-year-old girl. Yeah, it was hard to discover that.
There's something that I realized just from my own mother and her story and the trauma she went through that helps every time I think about something that she doesn't understand. It's seeing her as the little child.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to the child once in a while, and we don't realize like how deeply rooted ancestral and generational trauma really is in everybody's family at some capacity at some point. So it's so easy to judge the person for not being there for you, especially when you're going through it, but to have the knowledge later, especially being in the field of mental health, to witness her and hear her, it must be such a beautiful relationship that you've been able to cultivate from that.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I know there is, intergenerational trauma, but I think also I have been very lucky that I have developed kind of super survivor genes because my father was a Holocaust survivor and he had all of his family were murdered in Auschwitz. His little brother, the youngest one, was only 6 years old. He had a brother and a sister who survived, but one ended up with severe mental health and one passed away in London. But he just had this amazing outlook on life. And despite what he went through, he just refused to let it, identify him as someone that had survived the Holocaust. And he just loved life and he laughed all the time. And my mum as well, she had a terrible accident, which later on led her to be bedridden for a couple of years. And she just decided one day, after listening to a hypnotherapist on the radio, she was going to heal herself and threw away all the medicines and sacked all the nurses and used hypnosis. So I think those genes in there to survive whatever happens and come out the other side and actually grow through what you go through. I think I must have inherited some of that.
I have a feeling you have. And that, I mean, if there is not an atrocity that's worse than the Holocaust, I can't even understand it. Was your father open to talking about his experience at
Yes and
Auschwitz?
no. So he would tell us a little bit, but not an awful lot. But I'm one of 5. There's one boy and 4 girls. So when we all started to get husbands, he would start to speak a little bit more. And we used to go to these kind of second generation meetings So with my dad, who was the survivor, and then we were the next generation, and they were kind of get-togethers. But one time we went and it was just too much, so he kind of didn't speak about it. And I remember my sister was at university, at Bristol University, and they were recording, doing videos of survivors to put in the library to keep. And he was going to do it and going to do it, and then last minute he couldn't. So we knew a little bit, but I just think it was just a door he couldn't open inside of him. It would be just too overwhelming. But yeah, so we knew some. We knew
Yeah.
some, but not, I think we only knew a small percentage of what he would have gone through.
Do you think knowing that your father went through that created just an extra level of compassion
Yeah,
around your
absolutely.
home?
Maybe, yeah, absolutely. But also, it made me think, well, come on, if he can get through that, surely I can get through this
Yeah.
as well. Whatever I was thinking or feeling at the time, that was always in the back of my head. Look, he survived all of that. He came to the UK literally as an orphan with nothing, not knowing anyone, no money, and built up an empire, really good career. And I just think, yeah, we can get through some really awful stuff and actually not just get through it, we can thrive and we
Mhm.
can love life and we can, really live again. So he just showed me, not really by what he said, but how he lived his life, that actually we can get through anything if we really choose to.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Surely, my stepfather actually was uh, in Austria and got out just days before the Nazi invasion and lost his sister, lost many people. We lost people in our family. And that it makes you think and sit there for a second, like whatever I'm going through right now. And not to minimize what we're going through. We never
Mhm.
want to do that to ourselves because our journeys are our journeys.
Yeah.
But to sit there and think like your father or just the handful of survivors we have left on this planet, because it is such a,
Yeah.
as time passes, we lose more of them and the stories just need to be told. I can imagine how that can really resonate with you deeply to
Yeah.
be the thriver, not the survivor.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful that I have a chapter in my book called My Parents, and I do put my dad's story in there. So I think other people will know about Leo Geddy and what he went through. And, so other people will know about him. And so that way I kind of keep him going as well.
Yes, and that's a beautiful segue into talking about your book, Unbroken, which is how I first came to. That's how I first found you, was learning about Unbroken. But can we talk about the book a little bit? I'd love to.
Sure. Yeah.
When did you decide I'm sitting down, I'm penning this, and I'm going to put it out there in the world?
Yeah, I decided, and then it was kind of almost decided for me in a weird
Mm.
way. So most of the events for the Forgiveness Project take place in London, and I live in Glasgow, which is in Scotland. And Marina told me there's going to be an event in Shawlands Academy. Is that near? And it's like literally 2 minutes up the road. It was a school up the road. So she said there's a woman coming to speak called Marion Partington. So her sister was a victim of famous serial killers in the UK, Rose and Fred West. It was gruesome, horrible serial killers who buried the bodies in the house under the patios. So they found many, many bodies in their home. And she spoke at this multi-faith event, and she's spoken many, many times in prisons for like 10 years. And she'd written a book as well. And it's called If You Sit Very Still. I think that's what it's called. If you sit still. And I met her at the end. So it was lovely because I'd never met somebody from the Forgiveness Project before, another story, as we like to call ourselves. And inside my book that I had bought from her, she said, "Now you must speak." And I just thought, oh, I could. I could speak. And I thought, well, maybe I could just write my story down for myself. And as soon as I had that thought, literally, it just opened something inside my head. It's like, I don't know what happened. Something downloaded into me, and all of the words literally appeared. So at night, I would have trouble sleeping because they would be flying around in my head. And in the morning, I would sit down at my Mac and just write and write and write. And I really just thought I was writing it for me. But in about 8 weeks, I had written 70,000 words. And I thought, well, this kind of looks like a book. Maybe I should see if I can get a publisher. And fortunately, only about 3 months later, I had a contract. So something was supporting me. I don't know what or how, but I felt like I was helped in the writing of my book.
Were you a public speaker before at all? I mean, I know you're talking about this specific incident, but did you have trouble using your voice and being vocal prior to this?
When did my book come out? My book came out 2017. I had just started to speak because my story went public 2014. So I was asked to speak, I think in the October of 2014. That was my first event at a festival of light. It was a beautiful festival, and the fire alarm went off in the middle. But apart from that, it was a beautiful festival. So I was used to speaking for a few years, but I left school with no qualification, so I didn't even have an English, O level to my name. So if I can write a book, then really anyone out there can write a book. But yeah, I was getting more used to speaking. When I look back to the first tapes, I was never nervous, but I wasn't maybe as confident as I am now to share my story.
Mm. So you have gone even further than just doing the Festival of Light and some of the other speaking engagements you had. I mean, you have these 2 TED Talks that are out. The first one is the one I first came across. That was the Unbroken story. But then the second one you just did, was it last year? Was it during the pandemic?
It was during the pandemic. It was in this little office here, and everything is moved out of the way. So it's just a plain white background behind me. They took a long time, the students. It was TEDx University of Glasgow. They had some trouble with the license. So it literally took a year to get, over a year and a week or something, to get it up online, which was very frustrating. But hey, we got there in the end. So that was it was great for me because I did one to an audience of about 2,500 people, and then one to an audience of just me in my slippers and no one in the house, just praying that Amazon wouldn't ring the doorbell and interrupt my flow. But yeah, so it's nice to have had the 2 different experiences. Really good.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, and it is also like when you're not in the actual room with people, realizing that you are in the room with people.
Yeah.
There are people that are watching you. We're just not looking out on a room and seeing all of them.
It was streamed live to YouTube, so I could see the comments coming in as I was speaking. So that was good.
Oh, as you were speaking, how was it for you?
It was okay. So it kind of made me think, oh, there are people watching. It's okay.
Yeah.
Connecting. With
Validating in a way. Yeah. So and then look, besides just having these speaking engagements, which you speak often in addition to TED Talks, you also have your podcast, which is, tell me about the podcast a little bit.
Well, that really came about in the pandemic. I guess it was my gift from the pandemic because my career was just beginning to take off. I wasn't really an established speaker because I was still working as a therapist not that long before the pandemic. But then I made a decision, look, I can't do therapy and speaking. The speaking events were coming in more and I need to choose. So I finished working with my clients. And just in the February before pandemic, I was the closing keynote for a big conference in Namibia. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant. I love the speaking life. And then March came and then boom, everything was cancelled, disappeared, evaporated, my diary emptied. So I thought, what am I going to do? Really, what am I going to do? I'm not a therapist anymore. And part of me didn't want to go back to trauma. I've got so used to being around people that are positive, that are thriving. And that's no disrespect to people, but, I've did 14 years as a therapist. I worked for another 14 years in women's aid and 6 years in rape crisis. So I've done a lot of therapy, trauma work. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start a podcast because I know brilliant people. All the people I know from the Forgiveness Project. I'm also a recipient of the Global Resilience Project. So Emma Bell, who runs it, has taken 50 thrivers. I'm one of her thrivers. And she had really, I guess, has studied us to see what do we do that makes us thrive. So during the pandemic, her book came out, an audio book called 9 Secrets to Thriving. We don't all do all 9, but we all do 3 or 4 of the certain elements. So I was quite intrigued as well. It was quite interesting. So I just know a lot of amazing people. So I wanted to share stories to offer a bit of hope and a bit of positivity because it was such a dark time in the first lockdown. And I wanted to show people that we can really overcome adversity and not just bounce back, but we can bounce forward in life and we can make a difference to other people. So that's really my criteria for people that I interview, that people that have just, making a difference, and they've been through a lot of stuff, but they've overcome it and they're thrivers, I guess.
I love that. And I think that's why I align with your message so much, because it's exactly why I decided to amplify more. I mean, I come from a background in the broadcasting space. I've been a speaker for 25 plus years, and then got into the mental health side. So it's fusing both together and creating this space for the stories to be told, those traumas to triumphs, as I call it, or the pain to purpose, right?
Yep.
So we need to amplify more. Like there weren't millions of podcasts out there prior to the pandemic, maybe one, and I think it's tripled, if not almost quadrupled, with the amount of podcasts. They're not necessarily all active, but to see that there are so many people that are willing to hold space for others, but also hold space for themselves to share. I know in this journey with podcasting, even though I've been wearing this headphone and have a mic in front of me for so long, it continues to heal me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's wonderful, because I get to sit in people's fabulous energy and I hear their wisdom, but then I get to share it. And then the feedback I get, or the feedback they get, is like, one of my girlfriends listens in Germany, a Scottish woman that I know, and she said she doesn't relate to every single story every week, but there's something every single week that she can relate to. And that just was like, oh, that's really good. You don't have to have the same story. So I really believe in the power of sharing our stories. And I think, if somebody hears a story at the right time in their life, it has the power to transform, and it has the power to light up a new map, or light up a new path, which they'd never even thought about. So a new way out of whatever they're going through. So yeah, I really believe in the power of sharing our stories.
And on top of that, it always seems to happen just when you need it the most. Do you ever get those text messages or emails, or somebody reads your newsletter or comments on your social media and says, I really needed this today?
Yes, absolutely.
And you sit and I know I've been the one to say those words too.
Yeah.
But it's really the frequency and the energy we put out there, and something, whatever power source it is saying, I'm sending you this.
Yeah.
And it might be just 3 minutes of a conversation on your podcast, on my podcast, a speaking engagement, a page in your book that just touch, moves, and inspires somebody. So thank you for continuing to share your story.
Oh, you're welcome.
What is next for Madeline?
You know what? I don't really plan anything. Just kind of, well, obviously I did plan the podcast, but I kind of sat with the idea, and it was kind of like ideas just come to me, and I just think, I'll just see where it all goes.
Yeah.
So speaking events are coming back now. I do a lot online, but I'm getting more in person. So that's quite exciting to be back in the room, to see the whites of people's eyes. And I just always wait and see where it goes. I'm still really lucky, even though my book is 5 years old. I do still do quite a few book events. The recent one, I actually was the interviewer instead of the interviewee, which was a first for me. So that could be a new change. But then had conversations with somebody yesterday that actually maybe I'm going to be involved with a crime festival. I was the only non-fiction writer there a few years ago, but maybe we'll do a workshop, me and another friend who have written a memoir, to help people find their voice. And I just thought, I really like that idea, because they don't want to repeat what we've already done, just have me on a panel and speak about my book. So I thought, yeah, that really does appeal to me.
And I think one thing with this pandemic that we've really noticed, or at least I have, is that there are a lot of people putting their story to pen and paper. And there have been a lot of books that have been coming out, and there's never too much literature. There's never too much to be shared, whether it's at the mic or between the pages. And I've been working on that. I'm always so empowered and inspired when I hear somebody else dropped a book. I'm like, more power to you. Like, thank you for reminding me that's something I want to do. And there's so many avenues now to learn how to take your story and actually execute it in a way where your idea becomes action and turns into the book it is. How is 5 years later, after Unbroken has come out, do you resonate to it differently?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was translated into Italian, which was very exciting. So I could say I'm Italian, and I got loads of lovely blogs that I was tagged in. I had to go onto Google Translate, but it really hit home with the Italians. But then I was also became an audiobook. I did my own introduction. I didn't do the whole book because they wanted an actor to do it. So I did my introduction for the Audible book, and then in the pandemic, I downloaded it onto my phone and I listened to it, which I didn't think I'd be able to do. I was worried that it might be too much, but actually walking and walking for hours with my poor little dog whose legs got even shorter, it was okay. It was really okay to listen to it. It was almost as if that it didn't belong to me anymore. Once I had written it or listened to it, it's like I've sent it out there now because, my story is just a story of many, many people. My story is a story of so many other men and women. So it's not an uncommon story. It's maybe uncommon to write about it in the way that I have, but it was really good to listen to it, to realize actually this doesn't affect me at all anymore.
Yeah, it's great. You changed the narrative. It happened, but it's not happening. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like an old movie that we watched over and over and
Right.
over again. I got fed up of watching that movie.
Yeah.
I've seen it too many times on repeat. So, yeah, I've stopped watching it.
So you mentioned earlier that you have a daughter and it's, she's not 13 anymore. How has her story, I mean, not to speak for her, but in conversations you've had, what is it like to have a daughter knowing what you've been through? And how did that really resonate with you?
Well, I have
were a mother?
3 daughters.
You have 3 daughters.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was very conscious that I had the potential to riddle them with fear. I could transfer all of my paranoid thoughts and my fears and my phobias. I could jump it right into their mind. And so I had to make the effort to not do that to them because I struggled to become a mum. It took me a good few years to get my head around the idea of giving birth and being in that situation. And then I thought, what's the point if I do that to my kids, bringing them into this world? Because I want them to be, fierce, independent, sassy, brave, confident women. And I thought I could ruin them in some way. So I guess at 15, she had fake ID. She had all her friends back at my house. They were having prees. They were going clubbing. Yeah.
Like we
And
all did.
Yeah, but I wanted to her to know it was okay to do it in my house, that she was safe. And I've always said to any of them, listen, whatever you're doing, if you're drunk, you're stoned, you're lost, whatever's happened, just call us. And me or dad, one of us will always come and get you.
Yeah.
So just try to leave the communication open. They don't always take you up on that because, I'm still just their mum at the end of the day. But yeah, when the very first time Anna was very drunk, it was actually her friends who stopped her from phoning me. They must have been scared that she couldn't call home drunk. And eventually they allowed her to call. And she said, I told you my mum would come for me. I told you my mum would come. So yeah, she just said, gosh, anything could have happened. I couldn't even stand. I couldn't take out my contact lenses or anything. I don't know how I got home. So not that that is about victim blaming, because I was just paranoid about their safety.
Yeah.
And I just wanted them to know that whatever happens, don't lie to me. I'm not going to judge you. It's fine. We'll get past whatever happens.
I imagine that created the space for a much stronger relationship between you and your girls, being able to be open and accepting, and it's okay. Just be responsible. And responsible doesn't mean, okay, we all did it. We drank, we smoked, we did things we shouldn't do, but when your safety comes first and know that, I've got your back kind of thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Was it difficult for you, going back a little bit again, when you talk about getting into a relationship and eventually a marriage, and not having gone through that healing yet? How were you able to overcome the fears of actually allowing an intimacy with someone?
Yeah, that was tricky to start with. In the beginning, I think I was just so numbed out that I became very promiscuous, which was kind of a normal side effect. But then once I started to heal and feel, because you've got to feel in order to heal, those moments, the intimate moments, caused not problems, but at the end, I would just start to cry and cry and cry and cry. And that happened for many, many years. And it was nothing to do with my husband, but sometimes his face could turn into their face, and I would try to take him off me or get upset. And then the crying would just start. And he'd just say, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Yeah." I don't really understand where all this is coming from, but obviously it came. When you're in that intimate area, it's going to have all that trauma trapped in your body. He would just really put his face to mine, fill my eyes with his eyelashes and feel me crying and just hold me. And that's really all it took. So, yeah, I was always very supported.
Support is so important in that space, especially. Couldn't be any more intimate. And I just want to say we've been so caught up in this conversation, which has been really beautiful and open and vulnerable. So thank you for sharing your story. That if you are touched, moved, and inspired by this story yourself, my dear listener, please pass it along to one person. As Madeline said, you never know, just one person could resonate with 1, 2, or 3 minutes of the story. I encourage you to do so. Share it. Also share her podcast, give her podcast a listen, Unbroken, the healing story of storytelling, which I love it. And read the book. We're going to share all that in the podcast links. And of course, thank you for being here and just sharing your story. I would like to do a little something on the fun side with you to close things out. I love a little fun, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I've been writing a couple words down. My listeners know that I do this. I like to play a little word play, a little word association. We're going to do a rapid fire. I'm going to throw out a word to you and just come back as fast as you can with one single word.
Okay.
I love the look on your face. Oh my goodness. Sometimes I record the video, as my listeners know, but I only repurpose pieces of it. I think I need to start repurposing the rapid fire, because that first thought that where the eyes are like, oh my goodness, what am I doing, is gold. That was adorable, actually. Okay. All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Shame.
Gone.
Intimacy.
Good.
Womanhood.
Me.
Betrayal.
Rubbish.
Mom.
Love.
Unbroken.
Me.
Forgiveness.
Freedom.
Healing.
Worth it. That's 2 words.
I'm going to end it there because I like that. Yeah, I have tons of other words, but I feel like we should all end in healing,
So worth it.
So worth it.
Difficult
Beautiful.
at times, hard and messy, but so worth it at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for your gift and your voice. And please do not stop sharing and holding space for others and holding space for yourself. That's what I want to say. But if you'd like to leave some final words with Holistically Speaking listeners, what would it be, Madeline?
I would just say that it's never too late to find your voice. Never too late to get support and heal and live the best life that you possibly can.
Amen to that. Love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If this episode touched, moved, and inspired you in any way, consider sharing it with just one person. It can make a difference. And if you enjoy podcasts as much as I do, give Madeline's podcast, Unbroken, Healing Through Storytelling, a listen. You can also pick up her book, Unbroken, and I'll share those links on the podcast page. And if you've been thinking about giving podcasting a try, I'm sharing a free trial to produce your own show by using Squadcast's remote recording platform. It's a great way to amplify your voice and share your message. HIListically Speaking is edited by David Seiss with music by Lipbone Redding. Never forget the power of your voice and storytelling. You've got it in you. So be kind to your mind and don't forget to laugh.